Well, Richard Mabey, CEO, co-founder of Juro. Welcome to the Vertical SaaS podcast.
Excited to be here. Thanks for having me, Gavin.
Yeah, excited to have you on. We've been kicking this one round for a little while now. You've been a busy man. You've been here, there, and everywhere.
There's a lot going on at the scale up stage, I can tell you.
Exciting new expansion out in the US, Boston, I believe, which is a city that I love in the US. So it seems like it's all going on for you guys at the moment. But for
Boston is
those
a
that
great city. I've just got back last week.
Oh, really? Were you there last week?
Yep.
I'm meaning to get myself out. I know a good some fantastic startup founders over there, not in legal tech and other areas. You know, Boston's quite well renowned for its health tech and a lot of good construction plays there. But yeah, it's a great city. Need to go over. Need to go over. Um, for those that don't know you, Richard, and many of those that will be listening will know who you are. But for those that don't, would you kindly just mind introducing yourself properly? A bit of a high level soup to nuts, who you are, and yeah, who you work for.
Awesome. Yeah. So I'm Richard Mabey. I'm co-founder and CEO at Juro. Juro is an intelligent contract automation platform. So we basically help businesses take the manual process of agreeing and managing contracts, and we have a whole suite of AI native tools that help you do that faster, smarter, and better. So the kinds of customers that we work with are typically processing a significant volume of contracts. So if you go to our website, you'll see the kind of Deliveroos and funnels of this world, which is growing really, really fast. And the paperwork and the contract side needs to keep up with that pace. So that's really what we're all about. I come from a legal background originally, but the company was founded in 2016. So we've kind of run through the startup phase through product market fit. We've raised now just about $40 million in funding. And we're working with customers all over the world, processing now, getting on for 3 million legal contracts.
Mm, awesome. And um, and you founded in 2016, as you say, in 20 you raised Series A, raised 5 million, and from there it just seems like it's just went a bit crazy. Like, what's the journey been like for you guys? How do you look back on it? What is it, 10 years now?
So we're just getting on for 9 years.
9 years.
I see it as kind of a game of two halves. So I think when we started, we were very high conviction on the problem that we solved. In fact, it's,
Hmm.
it's a pretty obvious problem, right? So if you talk to people who are dealing with legal paperwork, they'll rarely say this was like a super quick and easy process. But the
Hmm.
curious thing has really been why no one has comprehensively solved it. So in what we do, there is no kind of clear market leader. There's no sales force for legal. So it took us a really long time to kind of get to a level of product market fit where we had a differentiated product and value proposition. And it took us, I think it was like at least 4 years to get to a million in ARR. So that was a
Mm.
kind of fairly slow, steady, deliberate product building phase, working with design partners and kind of learning. And then kind of when we got to that stage and we raised the Series A from Union Square Ventures, we kind of got into company building and scaling, and that's where really all our growth has come from, is really in the last kind of 4 or 5 years. And it was a like I think pretty much all entrepreneurs say, it was a pretty tough to kind of get to that critical point. But
Mm.
since we've got that, it's been a very different experience. It's about how fast we can grow versus simply a fight for survival.
Mm. Do you think that's changed a little bit, how fast we can grow as opposed to change for survival in this current market? In terms of as fast as you can at all costs, flying the kitchen sink at it. It feels like we've went the other way the past 18, 24 months.
Right, I think you're totally right. One of our angel investors was the founder of Gumtree, and Gumtree was
Mm,
like really one of the first to market of marketplaces. So,
yeah.
as long as you had a website and you had the idea, you could throw out like minimal viable product. Like
Hmm.
an HTML web page. And because you were really the only person to solve that problem, that speed to market thing was just like immense. And you could really ship an MVP. I think what's changed is there's a huge kind of Cambrian explosion of startups. And so the kind of basic expectation is not just you have a minimum viable product, but you have a lovable product, a product which, like, from V1, people are going to use, find value in, and love. So I think that's like force number one. Force number two is it's actually much easier to build than it used to be. So I remember in 2016, 2017, we just had to build a lot of stuff, and it took a really, really long time to, like, the constraint being like humans writing code. And now you look at some of the examples out there of kind of 4 or 5 person companies who are able to scale up to 10 or 20 million in ARR, and AI is real there. And we're experiencing that now. We have our engineering team is using Cursor. 85% of our code is now written, at least the first draft, by AI. That's completely changed. And so that initial kind of learning period should, in 2025, 26, be much, much shorter. And it should be that we can kind of push out high quality, minimum viable products to test things. So yeah, I'd say it's very different now from what it was.
Mm. And the other thing is, I mean, you were probably built a legal tech before the word legal tech was cool, right? Like 9, 10 years ago, it was a thing, it was a hot market, then we kind of saw a bit of a dip away from it. CLM, document management review were top of the list. And now a lot of the activity right now is, of course, defined by figuring out what LLMs can do that prior generations of software couldn't. And look, that's not to say that, traditional software, if you want to call it that, doesn't have a primary place, but it's just more that, when you have this tech unlock that VCs, founders like yourself, you want to be the first to capture it. So do you kind of feel like now the game has changed a little bit, and legal tech, is it even legal tech we're building now? Like, I guess, what's your thoughts on the word legal tech? Do you class Juro as a legal tech, or do you class Juro as or do you think most software companies now in the legal space should be defined as just a software company that builds tech to help legal professionals? I don't know.
Yeah.
Maybe it's a game of definitions. I don't know.
It's interesting, isn't it? I mean, so certainly when we started, legal tech was not a thing. And
Was it not?
I think that's actually really good for starting a company. As you start in a space that is deeply unsexy, and it kind of proves in a way that you're solving a problem you're passionate about, but actually it's not just the hot thing. And I think,
Yeah.
the further we get into the legal tech wave, there's like millions and millions of these kind of word plug-in GPT wrappers coming out, and they solve real problems. But a lot of it is like chasing the wave. And so I think that's definitely changed. It has become a very, very sexy space. And actually there's a really good reason for that, which is, legal workflows are generally super, super inefficient. And so I think the unlocks for me are, one, I think AI is starting to tackle like more complex tasks. So in the early days, we were kind of chip around the edge of this. So if you take, for example, like a contract, we built a collaboration platform for contracts. So you could generate an agreement, and then without having to go into Microsoft Word and do track changes, you could kind of do everything in the browser end to end. And it was better and it was faster, but it was all kind of marginal, right? And now with LLMs and the agents we have in Juro, you can actually mark up contracts using AI. And that is suddenly like a really like high value thing. So I think there is a definite step change from where we were. But to your question on like, is it really legal tech? I mean, we definitely get called legal tech. I think like one of the curious things about Juro is because we power contracts within a business, so not for law firms, but within a business, we work with the in-house legal team, but we also work a lot with sales teams, commercial teams, partnership teams, HR teams, the operators of contracts. So in the end, this just is a kind of a piece of AI software that sits across the enterprise. And again, the packaging and the labeling, don't mind so much how people perceive it. It's more around kind of where's the value, and how can you really help people to do their jobs better.
Yeah. I ask it because I was on a call with I wouldn't obviously mention them, but I was on a call with a client of ours where I obviously run a recruitment firm alongside this podcast, and it's a legal tech. I call them a legal tech, and one of the first things they said to me, not in a combative way, just more like, yeah, we actually don't really like the word legal tech. It's a bit of a dirty word in our business, and I just thought interesting. But they do the same thing, or not the same thing, but they're in the same space as you guys. It's in-house, so they technically can work with any business. It's not geared towards the court systems. It's not geared towards just lawyers or how you take depositions or something. It's like it's just working with any business. So they just want to be regarded as a software company. But
Yeah,
there's no
interesting.
doubt that that initial wedge, you wouldn't be where you are today if the wedge wasn't a legal tech, you know?
Yes, that's right. And I actually, I'm probably more forgiving on the labels. I really don't mind that. But it does go to the kind of core of Juro. And, the mission we set when we start was to help the world agree faster and to do that by making contracts incredibly easy for anyone to agree and manage. And so the starting point for us was a lot of the tasks that we think of as being legal are not really legal. So to
Yeah.
give you an example, if you have a sales, let's take one of your kind of client contracts
Yeah.
as a recruiter. If someone says, I want to change the commission from X to Y,
Mm.
yes, you are marking up a contract, but actually it's just a commercial point. And I think what AI unlocks is the ability for folks who aren't trained lawyers to execute really fast and within certain parameters and guardrails set by lawyers
Mm.
tasks that we previously thought of as the sole preserve of these professionals. And that to me is really exciting because you're democratizing access to legal services. And that's really kind of what we're all about. And I do think AI is a huge unlock for that.
Mm. There was a guy, I just read it the other day. I don't know if it was in the UK or the US. I can't remember. But he was a startup founder and he was getting taken to court by someone. And he just created his own defense through ChatGPT and went up and he represented himself and he won.
Right.
He beat this thing like I think it was like a crazy like somebody coming after him for compensation for like $1 million or something. I don't know. And he went and battled it himself. But the question I was thinking there is like, when does it get to the point? Because it hallucinates a lot. You know, what do you or what do you Juro do or what do you feel like? Are you seeing much in the market in the sense of, I guess, creating a bit of a warranty, a bit of a backstop in the sense that, look, this is going to come out with, like, so I go in and say, give me all the details of really basic example, the snail case, right? Everyone knows the snail case. We'll use this and we'll
Right.
use that. So we know that's legit. But when you start getting into cases where you're like, I've never heard of that, but that's a really good one. I'm going to use that. And then you go up in court and use it and you get completely laughed out the courtroom. Like, how do you stop that from happening?
Yeah. Well, it's a good question. So the kind of Donahue and Stevenson case is it's the first kind of lesson of law school.
Yeah.
And if you ask ChatGPT about it, it will kind of give you a good summary of what it was and it can apply it. You know, we're not in the business really of delivering legal advice.
Yeah.
So we're a platform, and I think the way we see it is, a lot of folks will go to a law firm for very simple questions, and they'll pay a
Yeah.
lot of money to get an answer that ChatGPT or Claude or Gemini could probably come up with, right? Now, yes, I would say there's still accuracy questions. How much trust is there? There are various
Hmm.
players in the market trying to control for this. You look at kind of co-counsel in Thomson Reuters, they're saying we have a content advantage. Wherever
Hmm.
that goes, like I expect that the level of trust will increase there. And then you have the really complex stuff that has a huge downside. So if, for example, you're doing an M&A transaction and you get something wrong, this is what I used to do at Freshfields. You get something wrong, maybe it's going to cost you $500 million. Would you then pay to have like super smart professionals to oversee AI, verify everything, have a professional indemnity policy to kind of control for that? Probably yes. But if the total downside is like $1,000, why spend $1,000 to get an answer you could have answered? And that area of the market, which we don't really play in, the kind of consumer end, is again, I'm so excited about that because there are many people. In fact, most people cannot afford to instruct a lawyer. Lawyers
Mm.
like cost thousands of pounds a day potentially to advise. And
Yeah.
if it's the choice between nothing and an AI, well, the AI is better than nothing.
Mm.
And we think that's a really good
Yeah. Yeah, totally agree. Well, look, we're going to get into a few other topics, but just to finish on, I guess, our kind of introductory piece here, you mentioned when you were at Freshfields, you studied M&A. How long were you a lawyer for? Like, how long were you kind of out of law school before you started Juro?
Not that long. So I was out of
Like,
law school. I mean, so I trained there. I had a great time at Freshfields. I trained there. I qualified into corporate, and I spent maybe a year and a half post qualification. So it was about 3.5 years total, and so not very long. And I got lots of exposure. I spent 6 months seconded to an in-house team that gave me a lot of the insight behind why Juro should be founded. It was great training, rigorous.
Mm.
But I knew fairly quickly that I wanted to found something. And I kind of thought the longer I stay on this path, the harder it will be to get off. And that's kind of, I think, a lot of legal tech founders who've come from that background. Because it's an unusual path, right? Which is you sort of start with something to lose. And
That's
this
why.
is something my mother still reminds me of this all the time, which is like, you could have been a partner in a Magic Circle law firm. What are you doing with your life? Um, and but I thought, take the plunge, see what happens.
Man,
So
I think it's pretty incredible. I was just thinking about it. Co-founder CEO of Juro, one of UK and Ireland's leading, got to be top 100 fastest growing tech scale ups. I think I read somewhere that you were what was it, the top 10 legal technologists globally by Financial Times. And you started this company that, as I say, has went on to do some incredible things over the past nearly decades with almost virtually no professional work experience, really, other than, of course, you applied your trade in a fantastic law school at a fantastic law firm for a short period of time. But I mean, you had really no God-given right to go and start the company when you did. And it's just like, it's that, the reason why I bring it up is because, like, what's your advice to someone that is maybe thinking about doing that versus the advice that maybe I took, which was go and learn your trade for like 5, 6 years, work with some industry experts, and then go and do your thing then, you know?
yeah, so look, I think my advice is everything has kind of changed in the world of services work. So UK economy is like 81%, I think, services. So we don't really make stuff. I mean, we make a bit of stuff. We don't really make stuff. Most of what we do is like people like you and me talking to people, having meetings and sending emails and stuff, right? Services. Um, so that work is going to change profoundly. I think if you read Bill Gates on this, he's pretty like on the money, but like the idea of just going and having a sort of, join a professional service, like kind of go there, don't innovate, do anything, that's no longer really an option.
Hmm.
I also had the same advice as you, which was everyone said, go and do, your 10 years time and, do your time, learn the stuff, get the skills. I found that I learned by doing much more than by observing. So I think throwing yourself in that deep end and trying to create something from nothing is a great learning experience. 'Cause it's very intense, and founders work like 6, 7 days a week and so on and so forth. It's very intense, not for everyone. But I think there's a strong temptation, especially for me as a lawyer, and I found this is kind of you wait for perfection. I got to wait until I have a perfect website and I have a perfect product and I've raised the money,
Yeah.
and then we'll start going. And actually, it's all about going out, trying stuff, running really fast. And I think there's never been a better time to do that. Like I was looking at Lovable AI, which is one of the kind of website and product builders using AI. And I gave it some prompts this morning. I was talking to a founder about something, and I said, I'm just going to prompt this. I'm going to share a screen and just show you like what it would take to build a website. And it built a whole website. It was really good in 30 seconds. And in the old days, you would say, well, I've got to go and raise 20K to pay an agency to design it, and then I've got to get a dev agency. So the cost is cheaper, but I think you've just got to try stuff, and it's a mindset, right? Really, as much as anything else. And if you do, you fail at lots of stuff, and you learn really fast, and you kind of get going. And if you think about it too much, there are so many reasons not to do it. My mother would want, what are you doing? This is a terrible idea. But so many reasons, financial and so on. I think you just got to do it if that's what you want to do and try.
If it's what you want to do and try, yeah, exactly. There's no point in forcing the entrepreneurial thing out of you if it's not deep down what you want to do. Lovable, I've heard about them a few times. Some guys in SF and stuff that I know well and talk it up. They like it a lot. I've never used it, but you can basically just build anything on this by just chatting with it then, any product.
Yeah, and it will literally code the whole product.
Mm,
That if you think about building like a minimum viable product now,
it's perfect.
it's incredible. So you can test something in a day. which would have taken you 6 months. So I kind
Wow.
of hope as well people will do this on the side of their jobs. While they're figuring out whether they're ready to take the plunge, why not just do something like super lightweight on the side, test it out, see if anyone cares. If they do, great, you got some data and just run at it.
Yeah. There's something you mentioned there as well about the services business in the UK. 81% is services, is that right? I didn't actually know that. But really, if you think about any services business today, there's probably opportunity. And that's one thing that, as a vertical SaaS recruitment specialist, I'm really excited about. But the conversation around and the services business about AI not is not going to take your job, like we won't talk about this in too much depth, but I feel like it's kind of like a duty of care almost, for people that are really embedded in the space and working with it and seeing what's going on, that like to really just be quite honest about it and say that it is, of course it is. Like it's not going to take everyone's job, it's not going to be a mass takeover, but the reason I say that is like, do you agree with me? And if you do, like, what do you think that looks like in law? Because you wrote an interesting piece on what was it? Let me just get up here. The what if lawyers don't want to get more work done? So you are taking on all this technology, replacing maybe the lower end of maybe research stuff that a human just doesn't need to do anymore. And then we talk about people doing this high level strategic work, but I don't know. I feel like a lot of it now is just buzzwords again. Like, yeah, it allows the humans to focus on the human work, the human, and it's kind of like we all nod along and go, yeah, yeah, the human work, but it's like, what the fuck is that?
Yeah.
So like, I feel like it's a bit more of a, I feel like that is still a cop out. It's like, it will allow you to focus on the human work. No, it won't. You won't have a job
Yes.
unless you have a really like community driven, just I don't know what it is, but what do you think of that?
I
That's
mean,
a bit of a ramble.
I basically agree with you, right? I mean, I think, what normally happens in technology cycles is everyone says, technology is coming, all the jobs are going to be lost. And then what happens is new jobs are created which sort of adapt. So, for
Mm,
example, in the Industrial Revolution, without kind of going too deep on this, uh, you know, there was a new job called machine operator,
mm,
right? And so as the automation came in, there was a need. I think what's different about this wave is like, especially in the case of agentic AI, it actually
hmm.
is doing the whole job with a need for very little supervision.
Yeah.
And so to give you an example, the whole company, Juro, were kind of building AI internally. And one of the things I'd been doing as a CEO is sending like a weekly update, which says, hey, here's how we're doing on our targets, and these are the focus areas for the week, and so on. And
Mhm.
then I've now got like I'm using like Zapier to build agents, which just look at all of like the updates and the Notion pages, and then takes my tone of voice and does it.
Wow.
So we don't need a human to supervise that task. That task is gone. That's just like on a kind of flywheel forever. So I do think it's categorically different. I think that there's pluses and minuses. The plus is theoretically there should be a world of infinite abundance and everyone gets the accesses to any services they need. So in the case of legal services,
Hmm.
as I said previously, if you had no access to legal services and now you have access to some, brilliant. And if the marginal cost is essentially zero, even better. I
Mm.
think the bad stuff is society, will need to adapt, and generally society doesn't adapt that quickly. So we're going to see winners and losers. We're going to see people who have really adapted to this way of working absolutely thrive. We see wage growth will go up as you have a smaller number of people operating in a law firm, accountancy firm, recruitment business, whatever it is. And then you'll see other folks who really won't survive. And that's where I think, I'm not into all this kind of policy side, but you start hearing about universal basic income and 2-day work weeks and stuff. And that doesn't
Hmm.
seem super far-fetched to me. So I think like the next 2, 3, 4 years, this will start to pan out. And so as someone who like me works in the services industry, as do you, it's like what should you do to prepare? And I think the only thing you can do is just really get abreast of the technology and try stuff.
Hmm.
And if you can, use a agent builder, which frankly anyone can, and you try it, I think that's just like a great way to get up the curve.
Mm. So let's like dumb this down a little bit as if one of my favourite films is Margin Call when the guy says, "Speak to me like I'm a golden retriever, like I understand nothing." Amazing film. If you've not seen it, watch it. But agentic AI. It's no secret that the legal space, maybe of course in in-house departments, you're working with really innovative businesses. But let's, I guess, take it back for people that might be listening that are working for law firms that are maybe unsophisticated when it comes to technology, really have no idea what the hell agentic AI means. Like, what does agentic AI really mean to you, and
Yeah.
how should people perceive it?
So essentially, an agent is an AI that can do two things. One is they can conduct multiple tasks, not just one task. So they can conduct like a chain of tasks: step one, step two, step three, step four, step five. And second, they can do that autonomously without humans overseeing them. So to give you a sort of Juro example of this, if you
Yeah.
take a non-disclosure agreement, a kind of really standard legal contract, what would happen in a business is you would receive an NDA. You would then send it to your in-house legal team, maybe even a law firm. They would open it in Microsoft Word. They would start deleting stuff in track
Yeah.
changes and adding stuff, your comments, and then they would send it back to the other side. And you'd have this kind of like ping pong game where people would say, I kind of agree with this and I don't agree with that. And you'd negotiate and eventually you get to an agreed document, you go and sign it. What an agent could do is you could say, I'm uploading it, and this is what you can do now in Juro. I'm uploading this NDA to Slack. I'm saying at Juro agent, help. Juro agent will say, just want to confirm with you that I need to review this document against a playbook, tell you if it complies. If it doesn't comply, also mark it up. You say, that's right, go and do it. So we'll go and find the playbook. It will go and read the whole document. It will do complex reasoning. It will review it, and it will reply to say, this complies apart from in the following two areas, and I have redlined it, and here it is. So in that case, it is a full replacement for a lawyer. Now, in some cases, lawyers will say, well, we want to be in the loop, in which case we have all tools for that. And some people say, look, we need to, that can do a first pass and then we can verify it. But where it's heading towards is lawyers do not need to do that typing into a document thing in certain cases. So that is the core difference between an agent and the co-pilot is more helping the human to do that stuff a bit faster.
So that's agents in the context of AI. How do you define the difference between a workflow and an agent?
Interesting. So again, I think workflow is probably up for debate. Workflow to me implies that there are human-led steps in a chain of tasks, so human in the loop. So a workflow might be create a piece of content, then publish it, then measure the results. And so typically you can have workflow software which will guide humans that go and click those buttons. An agent will do all of that workflow, but with no human involvement. So I think the difference is one of autonomy versus human in the loop.
And you've spoken about again the how the agents are in the context of AI. Defined that again. It's debatable. Everyone will have a different answer. And also you've talked about how Juro are using agents, but more wider industry outside of what Juro are doing. Why does it matter for law? Why does agentic AI matter so much for law? Or is it just, again, this thing that people that are developing agentic AI are just peddling? They're working the algorithm. People feel like they need to adopt it, but so yeah, stress the importance of agentic AI in law.
Yes. So I think there are two constraints in old law, right? Which was my experience. First is just the volume of tasks you do as a lawyer that aren't legal is really high. So, for example, filing emails, for example, comparing two Word files, for example, kind of setting up a data room. So, and that work in a law firm is still billed by the hour at the same rate. So if you're instructing a Magic Circle law firm, you might have a lawyer that you're paying 700 quid, £1,000 an hour to go and do those non-legal process tasks. So that's number one. The second is actually agents are kind of abundant and lawyers are scarce. So for example, you could have, in a jury, have multiple agents running. You could have 1 million agents running at the same time. So if, for example, you had to do due diligence, let's take a ridiculous example on 500 million documents, you could have multiple agents working on that at the same time. versus needing an army of people. And one of the best examples I heard, I was at Legal Week in New York, I heard about this, was there was a law firm that was asked to do a due diligence exercise. That was kind of the work I did as a lawyer. And it was like, we've got 30,000 documents, you've got to review them. So option one is you get humans in a windowless room and you read them all and you kind of fill out a table and you risk score them. Option two was you use the first generation of AI. So you basically have humans do it, but they're kind of using AI to kind of automate a first pass review and then you review it. And option three was agents, which is you tell the agent what to do, they read all of the documents, they come back to you. And the first amount, I think, was going to be billed at $2 million in legal fees. The second was going to be billed at like $1 million in legal fees. And the third was going to be billed at $300,000 in legal fees. Now, $300,000 for like an agent to do it is still really expensive.
It's a lot, yeah.
It's huge.
Yeah. I thought you were going to say like $300.
Well, that's what you would think, but the win-win is for the client. It's obviously much cheaper, but also the law firms can get huge margins on this. Like if you actually need a law firm to do it, rather than having a 30% margin, you could have a 90% margin because you say that you're supervising this, you're defining the prompts, maybe you're checking a sample, making sure it's okay, it's going on the firm's professional indemnity policy, the red carpet thing. But either way, there's a lower level of legal fees by a factor of 90% lower, or whatever it is.
Yeah, that's wild. That is wild. Yeah, that's a really interesting one for legal tech. I really wanted to get out to that one in New York, but we'll need to settle for the one in London. We'll do New York next year. But I want to move on, Richard, to something that, again, I was really excited to dig into. The State of In-House Legal Report, published, drafted up by you and the team at Juro, which is now fully public, right? To everyone.
It is, yeah.
So I want to go through it all. Within reason. But, the first part is the part that I just naturally felt really interesting. I think a lot of people will relate to is that under pressure, stress, burnout aspects of in-house legal professionals. And the stats were quite wild. I thought burnout, I'm going to read them here, is widespread. 23.3% experience burnout in the last year, 15.1% are currently burned out, 32% feel way more stressed than a year ago. And senior lawyers, this one again was pretty staggering, senior lawyers are 3 times more likely to report increased stress. Maybe that's not a surprise, but it is to me. Like, I guess my question is, when I think about those stats and I think about people going in-house, maybe I'm a bit naive, but is the point of going in-house not to have that promise of a better balance?
Well, I think it is, right? And we have a couple of thousand in-house lawyers in our community, and when we speak to them, like you ask how many of you want to go back to a law firm, it's usually 0%. So people have kind of made that choice, and I don't think it's like just for balance, but that's one big factor. You're not working 100 hours a week in a magic
balance and money.
Yeah. And the difference here is that you kind of go into these environments thinking you get balance, but actually the stats indicate there is not any balance for many people. And so, again, we have a few hypotheses where this comes from, but let's just remember, burnout is actually like a medical condition. So this isn't just I'm feeling a bit stressed at work. This is like a very serious thing. So where does that come from? And I think it's, again, this is just hypotheses. We're not psychologists, right? But I think we see a few things. One is like the need for instant reaction, which is true in legal, it's true in other areas. Adds a compounder to that stress. So, for example, if people are sending you Slack messages or Teams messages all the time, requiring instant responses, that leads to this kind of fire hose of stimulation and information and need to react. And often we've seen cases where that's just managed badly. So legal teams are sort of held accountable for instant responses at 9 p.m. to a Slack message. And that, again, that doesn't help. Then there is the please do more and more work, but we're not hiring anyone else into the team.
Yeah.
So, and, we're kind of guilty of this at Juro, but like our general counsel we hired, and, I think initially we said, well, let's, hire then second hire after so many millions in ARR. And we kind of got there and we said, well, we can probably automate a little bit more. But there's kind of this pushing. There is a severe mismatch between the resource and what is required of those teams. There's do more with less. And some teams are kind of getting through that and they're automating and they're outsourcing, but some teams are just absolutely kind of crushed with work. And then the third thing is, I think, again, as you say, if you've traded out probably a higher salary at a firm and you've gone for more balance and more autonomy and ownership, is if you're not getting that, it's also kind of an existential feeling of like, why did I do this? I could have been earning double at this firm and it's just as stressful here. So I think that there's something like kind of badly wrong with that balance, at least in the sample we saw.
And the most senior lawyers part, because these are the guys that have been doing it for 20 years, they're partners, they've got the game figured out, right? They've got teams under them, they've got paralegals, they've got etc. etc. Why are they reporting higher stress? Is this about resourcing, or is it, again, to your points there, unrealistic expectations from the exec teams, do you think?
I think well, I think it's a bit of both, right? So I think if you and then again in some of the sample size here is skewed towards smaller in-house teams, but if you
Right.
take examples of much larger teams, so 50 lawyers in the team, it's an exec role to be a general counsel or a CLO, and I think that's a very different thing from you're a three-person legal team in a scale up and you're just like overloaded with routine work. So yeah, I think it's a bit of that. I also think businesses need to understand better the value of legal. So there's often a fair amount of kind of mystique about this. Like, is this a compliance department? Like, what is legal really for? And I think that starts at the top, right? So there are concrete things that CEOs can do to ensure that there's a clear mission behind what the legal team is doing, and there's good levels of discussion on capacity versus resource, and it's not just a sort of no, no, no. And there's support for automation, right? So if CEOs are out there saying, and I think we have this in the survey, but the sort of CFOs and CEOs are saying, I think it's like 90% of them said,
93.
93, yeah. Please increase adoption of AI solutions. Great.
Yeah.
It's got to be backed up with, okay, is it easy to buy a solution? Is there budget for that solution? And there's a bit of a mismatch there between the kind of the talk and then the reality, which again kind of compounds the issue.
Yeah, that was just going on my next point. Like, the state of adoption, like 2024 was very much, I think, figuring out for a lot of people, speaking to companies like Juro and, really thinking we really need to get on top of this now. We really need to come up with a strategy here, or we're going to get eaten alive. And then 2025 seems like the year of adoption. However, we're in May now, and I mean, your report, in some ways, 93% of lawyers say their boss wants to do more with AI. CEOs and CFOs are actively pushing legal to adopt. The benefits are time savings, doing more work, but ultimately the friction points are that the change management piece is still a huge blocker, the adoption piece is still a huge blocker, and the trust and the accuracy of these things are, to some people, that, yeah, it seems to be a huge blocker. So, like, what is your kind of take on the year of adoption so far? Like, how do you think it's going? Is it going well? Or, like, yeah, what are you kind of seeing based on just who you're interacting with?
It's going really well. So I'd say this year is a step change difference from last year. I mean, in this survey, I think we said 90% of in-house lawyers are using some degree of AI weekly or daily, which is that didn't happen a year ago. A year ago, we were still in the dabbling phase, few super users, but most people reading articles saying this is interesting, but not doing it. We're now definitely in the doing phase, and that's reflected in our own data. So we have the majority of our customers are using AI on a monthly basis. So there is a step change difference, and I think it's tempting as a vendor to say this is the answer to everyone's prayers. Because everyone says we're super overworked, we've got no more resource. We're saying, hey, here's the promised land, it's automation.
Yeah.
My sense is it's part of the solution, but it's not the whole solution. And I think, there's a limitation to what vendors can do, but I think it's much more about the leadership in these businesses, providing an environment in which lawyers can thrive, in which lawyers are valued, in which, there's proper resource conversations and so on. So, while I'm tempted to say, don't worry, by Juro, all your prayers will be answered, that's not really the case. It's part of the puzzle.
I mean, I'm a startup in myself. We launched Zanata just over a year ago, and I'm fortunate that I launched it in the wake of Gen AI, because now I'm not bound by any legacy CRMs, any,
Right.
I'm fully powered by Gen AI. We've built our own custom model. It's a research tool. We'll probably start actually releasing it to the public soon. But like, I'm also got shiny object syndrome,
Right.
and I mean the amount of recruitment specific AI tools that are coming out, and I've bought quite a few of them. And I must say, like, they now do the job, but in the beginning, it was just me and my company, and I must say, I thought I'd take. And I'm pretty technical. I'm pretty useless, but I'm pretty savvy at just working with stuff. Doing the whole vibe coding thing and working with these tools and just getting a bit of play with it. But I must say, even I was thinking like this is automating the shit out of everything, but I'm having to like spend so
Yeah.
much time getting it there. It doesn't even feel worth it now. Uh,
You definitely do hit up against those barriers where it's not quite as easy as you might think. But then
yeah.
you have such an advantage in your business. You're almost starting afresh in this paradigm. I think the larger enterprises are kind of struggling to kind of turn this enormous ship
Hmm.
towards like fundamentally different ways of working. So I think a lot of the winners here are going to be the more agile, like smaller businesses that can adapt super fast, change what they're doing, build in a new paradigm. And I think, corporates may really struggle.
What do you think? What's your take on the relationship at the moment between in-house and outside counsel? Like again, your report, our law firm's delivering quite a staggering stat. 2% of GC said that big firms offered excellent value. 45% said poor or terrible. Like that's pretty well. So just 2% believe that big law provides value.
Yep.
Like, what do you think's going on there? And again, I'm going to move on to the next topic, which is billable hours. Spoke to a few people about this, but I'm keen to get your take. But that first part, what's going on with the big law firms?
Look, I mean, step into the shoes of an in-house lawyer. You're a trained lawyer. You're a smart person, and something comes up which is so risky or so complex, you want to outsource it to a firm, and you pay the firm $50,000 to answer the question that you could have had a stab out for a couple of days. Um, the bar there is really high, so it's got to be a service that is not just outsourcing what you do, but is providing something you absolutely could not have done yourself. And I
Yeah.
think that's the difference that we're now seeing, which is that sort of, well, I'll just outsource to a firm. No one really wants to print the £200 an hour thing when they've got someone in their team who can do it for 80% less. So I think that's dynamic number one. I also think some of the fees have gone up, right, in excess of inflation in some cases. I just think touching on the billable hour, it's kind of an insane way of billing. This is in the US, there's absolutely no movement from that. The UK is actually a little bit further ahead. But there are other ways of doing this, especially in an agentic world. You can tokenize. There's all kinds of different things you can do. But certainly in the segment that we play in, the sort of tech scale ups are a lot of our customers. There's just very low tolerance. And if you're doing a funding round, um, you're raising $1 billion and the legal fees are $20 million. Like no one really cares. But if you're raising a $10 million Series A and your law firm is trying to charge you $150,000 to sort of copy and paste some documents, it's just no longer really seen as acceptable. So I think that bar has really risen. As a result, internally, we insource like almost all of our work. We do sort of specialist fundraising firms, specialist IP, but 95% we're insourcing, and we can do that by hiring amazing people and not having to rely on the firms. And I think that's pretty consistent across the customer base. It's just the kind of the situations in which you'll instruct just go down and down in volume.
It just begs the question. I mean, if you're saying the US, the needle's not moved at all. In the UK, it's moved a little bit in terms of the billable hour. So it's kind of like, okay, go with us, and this is what you pay. So say there's an employment contract and somebody leaves under duress and they've got a restrictive covenant or something, right? And they want to get this contract reviewed. It's a 2-pager, 3-pager, not War and Peace, £2,000, right? To review that and give their thoughts on it. Or you can use this tech, pump it in there, and it'll probably give you the same advice, but you're not quite sure if it will. Like, where does that leave the consumer? Because it's like, I don't really want to know if I can trust this tech because this is my business on the line or this is like my life on the line. I'm going to have to go with this guy, but like still fucking doing this billable hour thing.
Well,
What's the answer? What do you think the answer is to? How do you have any thoughts on how you productize it beyond the billable
yeah.
hour?
I mean, I think there are options. But my view is if you've got a really complex legal problem, a great lawyer is gold.
Yeah, yeah, of course.
Absolutely worth those fees. I think if you look at the more cookie cutter, you've got a house transaction of the average size in the UK, and you're paying $1,000 to do a copy and paste conveyancing, or I just don't think that work will survive very long because it's not that complex. Now, there's still, to your point, a kind of trust element of how do you do that. My base assumption is that if you look at the rate of improvement in the models are going to improve to a rate that is far better than humans. And in some cases already, the output you can get in that example will outperform a bad solicitor.
Hmm.
And maybe they'll outperform a good solicitor. They may not outperform a great solicitor, but where are you on that? And I think, I just can't see in 5 years' time people just printing $1,000 to get answers to simple questions. And I
Hmm.
think that segment of the market will really, really suffer. Conversely, I think that sort of higher end of the market, really complex problem solving, I think they can thrive, right? They can operate internal AI tools within law firms. They can only tackle really specialist, hard questions, which what all the lawyers want to do. I think there's a very rich future for those, and I think for everything else, I see a ton of automation.
Yeah, and then part four was the kind of the legal tech stack. I think was really what it's about, the state of, I guess, legal tech, major hurdles and implementations. I guess despite the hype, yeah, you just can't call it hype anymore. It's just not. There's no hype about it, in my opinion. I'm sure you agree. But top frustrations off your report: cost 57.5%, poor adoption 43%. Lack of features and bad UX, 69% say their teams don't get enough budget, 40% pay for features they don't need. Like, why do these implementations fail to stick? Like, yeah, like, what do you think?
It's a big problem. So we one of the things we're proudest of is we have the top ranking. I think it's on G2 Crowd for
Mm,
uh, user adoption, which is kind of an
hmm
unsexy thing, right? It's not on sort of like best AI or whatever. But we think it's really important, just given the failure rates are so high in legal tech. And what tends to happen is they get sold top down. So the vendor goes to the kind of leadership and says, "Here's the answer to all your prayers,"
hmm
and not much thought is put into the next steps. So it's all about sell the deal, and then after that, it's a kind of a hope for the best. I think like the approach we've taken is one of bottoms up. So looking really deeply at like what are the workflows and jobs to be done of the people who actually use it, ensuring that's aligned prior to the onboarding of the customer, and then having a very structured onboarding where you'll have user focus groups and champions and check-ins and updates and data playbacks, and having a really, really rigorous kind of support and implementation process, and that really helps. So that's one. And then the second is just the level of UX in legal tech has generally been quite poor.
hmm
So CLM as a category is quite guilty of this. But if you
Yeah.
use some of those products, we're in an era, right, where I've just got the iPhone 16, and Siri just somehow like appears now and does kind of cool stuff. The expectation of a user in 2025 is this should be frictionless. So when they kind of find this space shuttle kind of control panel with all these weird buttons and defects, I was just like, I just can't use it. So to give an example, like one way we solve that is for the business teams who use Juro, like sales and HR, you can operate Juro without leaving Salesforce. You click a button, the contract's created, you see the contract in Juro, you click a button, someone like an agent will review it. Everything happens in the tool you're already in. And we do that just for the simple reason of change management is hard. What a lot of legal techs do is they get very lawyer centric and they say this is a great tool for lawyers and everyone needs to work like the lawyers. And that's not really the case. The point is you meet the users where they live, you make it extremely easy and give them great services and support, and then you have a shot at retaining those customers. As we have at Juro, we have customers we've retained for 8 years. So some of those first customers still with us. 8 years later.
Nice, nice. And the complaints are around cost, clunky UX, to your point, maybe using features that they don't have. I mean, legal or law as an industry is endless number of services, lots of parsing of documents, lots of complex data, really kludgy interconnectivity. Are you seeing or starting to see patterns of legal techs coming out now? A lot of them recently because of the Gen AI feels like they're still building something that's like what Juro's been doing for 10 years, but I can see why they're doing it. It's the wedge bit, and they're also doing it with Gen AI. But are you seeing any big misses in how vendors go to market to solve these problems?
I mean, like we welcome all of that, right? In my world, when we started here, like no one was really doing any of this, so we kind of welcome the competition. We want these problems to be solved for the industry.
Yeah.
I think there are two things, two failure points. I think one is like the catching the wave thing. So if you're like the 900th Microsoft Word AI review tool to come to market, you have to have a really, really good reason for existence, right? Because otherwise it's just kind of a crapshoot versus all of the 900 others. So I think there's a lot of Me Too stuff kind of happening, like people just copying what's out there. I think the second thing is thinking really deeply about the end-to-end workflow. We see that as a bit of a gap. So new startups typically start as point solutions. They do like one thing. But legal work is kind of complex, and especially collaboration between legal and business teams. So that kind of end-to-end workflow, that's being missed, I would say. And then outside of it, everyone wants a slice of the enterprise, but actually I'm really excited about the consumer space. Not what we're in, but I'm really excited about that space. And that's quite underpopulated. So there's a kind of few players kicking around there. But, if I was a founder today wanting to get into legal tech, I'd sort of tackle some of those like slightly less loved and less addressed segments of the market. There's amazing solutions that can be built.
What does that look like? I mean, one of the fascinating legal tech stories recently for me anyway is Legora. You know
Yeah.
Legora. Like, what is going on there? That is just insane. 80 million Series B. And I remember like 3 months ago they'd just done the Series A or something. Like, what's going on there?
I think there's real traction there. It's to say, it plays in that Harvey space as well. There's real traction in these businesses. I mean, someone told me Harvey.
But how is it different to like you, for example, and Harvey? Because it's all you're all focused on that in-house element, right?
Yeah, I mean, Lagora is, I think, mostly law firms, at least at this
It's
point.
law firms at this point, right? Okay.
But when you look at the actual differentials between the solutions, they become finer and finer. So there's a gradual convergence of legal tech. So if you look in these solutions like Harvey as well, yes, they're focused on different wedges, but they do data extraction, we do data extraction. They do like agents that review contracts, we do agents that review contracts. So there's more and more kind of overlap, and I think that's where the focus on the end user really matters, because at the end of the day, the customer doesn't care what category they're buying; they just want the best solution for them. And I think there's real traction. I mean, the other thing that's happening in law firms is there's just really big software budgets, especially in the Am Law 100. So they've kind of gone and built 10, 20-person innovation teams with $5 or $10 million of annual software spend. And it's
Yeah.
now taking and they're buying in a way that they weren't a year ago. So the Harveys and Lagoras are going to kind of thrive there. I think this market is so big and there are so many different wedges. What we're in is an intelligent contract automation for the enterprise. There's law firms, there's consumer, SMB. I think there can be multiple winners here and a whole ecosystem that emerges. But it is frothy, and the valuations. Someone telling me sort of seeing 50x ARR kind of multiples in some of these companies.
Yeah.
That's basically what happened to CLM in 2020 to 2022. So either that's the correct bet or not. Who knows? But we welcome the innovation. We welcome the competition.
And what do you think, to your point there about the spend now on all of this for law firms has become almost front and center, top three spends along the cloud, etc. I'm even noticing in the US, like we've placed a few CTOs and CIOs with law firms, and we mainly work with legal tech, so I work with software companies. So that's been interesting to place like a CIO in there, because a few years ago I'd never have done that.
Interesting. Yeah. Yeah.
Never done that, and that's actually a market I'm thinking about now, maybe doing more of. But it's a bit, it's just yeah, it kind of reminds me of my days in a law firm. The conversations that I'd maybe have with these high managers years ago, but the conversations I was having this year, I was like, yeah, they're speaking like a tech company. They know what they want, and they know the type of profile they want to get it. So yeah, really interesting. Do you think the way that we'll go in legal is? I spent a lot of years in insurance, a few years in insurance there. And it's been very much like the incumbents can't live without the startups, and startups can't live without the incumbents. It's not really them against each other. But then you see like Garfield, that law firm that's just fully AI. I've not had a look at it, but properly. But what way do you think we're going here? Do you think we're going down that route whereby, like, you look at Springbok, they got acquired by that New York law firm? Are we just going to go down that route now for the next few years, where it's just like agencies or tech companies being acquired by law firms? Or do you think we're going to go down the route of that Garfield, where people are going to be like, no, we're going to take on the law firms and we're going to be a digital first law firm?
I think both. So I think there will be consolidation. So if you look at the number of legal techs, it's gone from like, a few years ago, there's probably like 10 in the world you'd point to as kind of recognizable brands. That's got much more significant. There's a huge amount of seed capital now going in. That's not going to
Yeah.
end well for everyone. And so there'll be consolidation. It might be, the Juro buys up some seed stage startups, and we kind of think about that. It might be large, publishing houses consolidate up these tools. So I think there'll be some of that. But I do think that there will be breakout legal tech vendors that can scale to be really big businesses. And if you look in legal tech generally, there's like very few big businesses have been built. So, Clio in Canada, like that's a big business and that's done super, super well, hundreds of millions in ARR. But when you look at some of the other kind of legal techs, 20, 30 million in ARR, great, it's traction, but that's not a big business. So what I hope is that you will see, so IPO level businesses, 4, 5, 600 million in ARR that will emerge from this wave. And they can coexist alongside the law firms, alongside consolidators. But I think the ecosystem in its current very fragmented state, I don't think it will last like that forever.
And what's next for you guys? What's on the what's yeah, you've
Well,
done it all really. You've cracked law.
well, we're just getting started, really. I mean, we're in the scale up phase, right? So we've opened up Boston offices fairly recently. We're doing a lot of scaling in the US. We now have like 40% of our customers in the US. So we're kind of doing significant market entry stuff there. We continue to run our community. So we have, our annual conference, Scale Up GC, will have 400 or 500 people now, which is really
Yeah.
exciting. That's in June this year. And generally speaking, like we're figuring out, what is the ultimate product that in-house legal teams will want and need over the next 5 years. And we know that's going to look very different from what people are thinking about today. So we're doubling down very heavily on agentic and agents,
Yeah.
but also thinking about how that complements and leverages a CLM. And we think there's some magic to be built there. But in order to do that, we're kind of putting together world-class cross-functional teams. So lawyers, yeah, but also amazing designers, amazing engineers, ML engineers to go and do that. And we'll scale up. And that I think is just a really exciting kind of couple of years we have ahead.
Yeah. Yeah, it sounds like you guys are really just keep your finger on the pulse with it and try to get ahead of it, thinking 5, 6 years down the line, as opposed to probably I would, maybe get a bit of stick for saying this, but I think a lot of legal techs and law firms, they just look over their shoulder and it's very knee-jerk reaction. It's very much like, oh, they're using that, so we need to use it. It's like, but why? Why are you using it? Like, your business is totally different to theirs. But we've seen it. I've seen it in insurtech a lot as well. Like every carrier, MGA, whatever, all just trying to outdo each other on the best low no code or whatever it
Yeah.
might be for no real reason other than just so they could tell their potential customers that they also have it. It's like, oh no, but we use that as well. But it's like, yeah, but does it work with your model? You know?
Yeah, and there's definitely quite a lot of that happening. I mean, it's interesting on the other side of that. Like I spoke to a prospect yesterday actually who's ripping out a kind of legacy CLM, and they said that their vendor had been like chasing a lot of shiny objects. This kind of magpie syndrome of like co-pilots came along, they shipped one, they kind of scrapped it, and then agents have come along. There's sort of a kind of sense of FOMO in the vendor, whereas the customer, what they really want is to understand the vision of where you're going. Customers
Yeah.
also understand this is the bleeding edge, it's changing daily. They want to kind of
Hmm.
be on that journey, they want to be on your customer advisory board, and they want above all else to get like a huge amount of value from your tool. And so that kind of, and that's something that didn't used to really happen. So 3, 4 years ago, it was kind of give us some more features. Okay, we're semi-interested in roadmap. Now this is like you're a strategic partner of ours, and we want to know. And I think that FOMO syndrome, which you definitely see in law firms, but also in some vendors, it's just what are other people building it? Let's building it. I don't think that's going to be enough. I think you have to be thinking from first principles. I think you have to be moving extremely fast. At the end of the day, you have to do a better job in products. You have to build products which are demonstrably 10x better than the competition. And if you do that, the traction kind of takes care of itself.
So do you think that's the secret to building a high performing but sustainable legal culture then?
I think so. I mean, we have high performing sales and marketing, and we have a repeatable go to market engine. They're printing huge amounts of errors, amazing. But the foundational to everything is the product. And that's something that I just think in legal tech has often been, an afterthought. It's like, let's go and get the traction. Let's sign up some law firms. And then let's kind of, build what they say we should build and kind of catch up. And I think the result of that has been a lot of kind of Frankenstein products versus those saying, really deeply, what are the jobs to be done? Why are they done in that way? How could we radically improve on this? Having an experimental culture that iterates, leveraging amazing design. There's actually just not been enough of that. And we think if you get the foundation right, you get and build an amazing product, boy, is everything easier, right, when it comes to scaling up. And that I think is a huge opportunity for any founders going into legal tech is you're going into a category which has not great user experience. Can you do better?
Yeah, here, here. Great point to end on. Before I let you go, Richard, a kind of tongue-in-cheek question, but what's your unpopular opinion in law at the moment?
Yeah, good one. In
Be
law,
honest.
in, in law specifically, I would say I would say the scale of change that is coming, I think is being dramatically underestimated. So I think I've shifted my view from probably a year ago of the kind of humans are going to be here forever with co-pilots to no, this is kind of different. And I think that's quite a tough message to lawyers, of which we have thousands and thousands of lawyers to our customers. And I definitely see two categories emerging. People who are getting ahead of it are going to thrive and are already starting to thrive. And those who are skeptical, kind of laggards, I actually think are in like a lot of trouble. And so I think that sort of how severe this thing is, I think I'm now getting on the extreme end of that spectrum, which is where I wasn't probably even 6 months ago. But I've kind of seen it. I've seen the models. I've used the models. We've built things, and when you kind of get into just trying stuff, it's quite easy to realize the scale of what is being dealt with here, and I think that will have a profound impact on legal, as well as all other services roles in the coming years.
Yeah, and I think no one quite knows what the answer is. I could ask the question all day long. How can we protect against it? We just don't know. We don't know. I mean, I follow a guy, Greg Eisenberg. Do you know him?
I
Uh,
don't.
you don't. Greg Eisenberg. He's the CEO, co-founder of a company called Late Checkout. It's a holding company with a portfolio of internet businesses. He was previously the head of product at WeWork and advisor at TikTok and all that. But yeah, pretty influential guy. But he's saying he's predicting that we'll see at least 4 million layoffs driven by AI over the next 24 months. 2022, 23 tech companies laid off 40,000. 400,000 employees. Yeah, it's just some of the stats here are pretty wild. And I used to read this about 6 months ago and think, no, but actually the same as you now that I'm using the tools and I'm quite astounded sometimes at how just much cleverer it is than me. Like AI is way better than me.
Yeah.
And like, but it's just a hard truth that a lot of people don't want to admit, you
It's
know?
a really tough thing, and when you sort of think a few steps ahead, what does that mean for society? What does that mean for income inequality? What does it's There's some crazy things to think about. But as you say, like no one knows where it's going to go. You just got to do what's in your control, which is start using the stuff. And I think this. I remember, when I was at a law firm, you'd always wait to be trained, right? You
Mm.
remember this kind of time where IT was a thing you were trained on. It's just DIY. Just start using it. It's not that hard, and you'll get up the curve. And then that's that one. And then where things go next, we'll go and figure it out. But at least you've actually kind of used things and are starting to get value.
Yeah, yeah, agreed. Well, look, Richard, it's been really great to have you on. Really enjoyed the discussion. I hope you have as well, and I'm sure the listeners will. But well, yeah, we'll need to get you on again soon, later down the year, maybe next year or something, and revisit all this.
Well, thanks so much for having me, Gavin.
Yeah, likewise. Cheers.